Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Starter Deck Plus guides. Spencer and I will talk you through all three starter decks and what should be some easy and quick ways to upgrade them for local play events. Today we'll be looking at the Amberthyst starter deck, so let's dive in. First, we're going to be looking at the Amethyst starter deck, as you can see on screen now. Deck list here, and the main things that this deck is trying to do is what, Sneaky? Give me the breakdown.
So, so the base Amber Amethyst starter, it's kind of a weird starter because it's got two different packages in it that don't really gel all that well, which is the Princess package and then kind of the Villains package from Princess from Amber or Villains from Amethyst. But as a base starter, it's actually really good against the other starters because it is very, very consistent and has the most draw, and it has a very, very low curve. So the goal with this starter deck is really just flood the board with a bunch of low cost characters and then just outvalue your opponent in terms of questing, as well as giving you a couple of options with Maximus and Control Your Temper in order to trade effectively with your opponents in order to really maintain that board control. So that's kind of the way that the base starter deck plays. You know, just like all the starter decks, it's not super focused, and so that's kind of what we're going to be working on here once we get into our upgraded versions, is to kind of bring in a little bit more focus to the deck.
Yeah. One of the other things that catches me about this starter in particular is like one of the stars of the deck is not one of the face cards. It's the Floodborn Dr. Facilier, kind of a hidden gem of the deck where you wouldn't think to look for it, but it does go along with the idea behind Mickey and throwing your smaller minions into the bigger threats of your opponent and just getting them bounced back into hand to play them again. And then, but like you said, it's kind of like the opposite thing of the princesses, where you're trying to keep your stuff alive with restanding them with Moana, and it's a weird little package. But let's go ahead and move on to what, because our first idea of upgrading these decks is, especially during these early months, not a lot of stores have a lot of access to booster boxes and other booster packs and stuff like that. So a lot of the product that's available for everyone is going to be starter decks. So our first idea of an upgrade is, what if we take two of the starter decks and try to streamline it a little? And as you can see here, this is our list for what we would do with two of these decks. So what are the main changes that we tried to do here?
Yeah, so in a lot of games, smashing two starter decks together is a way to get like a very, very budget, not quite meta deck, but still competitive deck. But those are generally structure decks. But the same concept applies here as well, is by taking two of the starters and putting them together, we're able to focus in on what makes the good cards of the starter deck, and get rid of some of the chaff. So what we did here was we really focused in on pulling out a lot of stuff that didn't have a ton of value with the way that this deck in particular plays. So we pulled out like a lot of the combat tricks, because that's not really what this deck is looking to do. So we pulled out the Hey Haste, the Control Your Tempers, the Maximuses. We did keep Rafikis because they can just really swing tempo, especially if you're a second player. It can get you back onto the tempo swing. And we pulled out some of the more expensive cards that didn't quite fit, so we pulled out the Jetsam Flotsam package. And the goal here was really to focus in on the Princess package from Amber and the draw and value packages from Amethyst. And so, as you see here, pretty much all we kept from Amber was the various princesses and the Moanas and Be Our Guest. Be Our Guest is just a good card because, worst case scenario, it's ink, but if you're in a position later on where you're really looking for, a specific card like Dr. Facilier or Moana, it can really help you trim down your deck and search and find those cards that you need at the time. We went ahead and bumped up the draw package, so the Maleficents and the Friends on the other side to 4. We've got 2 Mickeys and 2 Faciliers now, making it much more likely for you to be able to pull them and be able to use them in order to gain that tempo advantage against your opponent. And we really just kind of focused in on that aspect of the game. We went with wardrobe over the Mickey just because the wardrobe with the extra willpower, it's just going to give us more of that board advantage, and that's really kind of where this deck is focusing in at this point. Is we're using the Amber packages with the Moana and the princesses to really be our lore generation, and then the Amethyst side of the package, outside of Pascal, who's a great little lore generator on his own, to really be the board control tempo side of things in order to help you maintain the board while your princesses are doing their thing and generating your lore. And then with the Faciliers, if your opponent does remove them through challenge, they just come back to your hand, and it just gives you that huge advantage in terms of tempo over time.
Yeah, especially since one of the main things that this deck in particular lacks is removal. So you do need your minions in order to... I keep saying minions. That's old Hearthstone seeping through. Your glimmers, you want your glimmers to be attacking on the board for your board advantage. Otherwise, your opponent will just overwhelm you in the long run if you don't do anything to interact with their board. So that's what the Amethyst package pretty much is for, is making using your characters to take out theirs.
Yes.
And being able to bring them back.
Yeah, because neither of these colors have any removal. So you've really got to be using your characters and making those challenges and getting those effective trades, and that's where the Mickey and the Facilier come in, is allowing you to sacrifice your characters to remove others, but then you get them back, and so it gives you that advantage over time.
And then our final upgrades that we wanted to talk about is some not too crazy, but still very doable if you get a few booster packs, able to slip some not too rare cards into these decks and try to build them out into some other styles and just expand on these colors in general. But for these colors in particular, we actually have 2 different ways that you can go with this deck, really depending on what direction that you feel like you want to take this. First step, we'll take a look at the villains package that you can put together.
So we pulled these decks out of the strategy channel in the Discord just to show what some people have been building. On the villain side of things, I don't remember who we pulled this from. They don't have their name in the picture, but whoever made this deck, thank you. So the focus on this one is really we're dumping the whole princess package and everything out of Amber except for the Hades package, the Be Our Guest, and then we're adding in some lanterns. So what you're looking to pick up on the Amber side of things here is a couple of more baby Hades, the big Hades, which in this picture here we've got the enchanted version, but don't worry, you can just go with the regular rares, and then the lanterns. And the great thing about that is all of these cards are just rares, which means they're not going to be very hard to get your hands on. And then on the Amethyst side, really all we're doing here is we're looking to focus in on the villains, and so the goal here is to flood your board with the villains, use some of them like Yzma and the Maleficents to gain the card advantage, and then eventually drop Hades on the board and quest for a bunch of lore and finish off the game. So one thing that's really useful here is we've still got this shifted Dr. Facilier, and that's going to give us a lot of advantage here, because if your opponent does remove your villains off the board, you can play them again, which means that you've got a better chance of getting out a big Hades late game. The smaller Hades also lets you recur stuff, so if you need to, once again, just gives you more opportunity in order to make sure that your board has enough villains on play in order to make Hades worthwhile and quest for a large amount of lore. You've got a couple of Jafars on here. They're really nice because they can... The Keeper of Secrets Jafar has the potential to have a lot of strength, letting you make some nice trades. And then the Challenger Jafar has Challenger base, swinging for 5/5 as a 4, which lets him help you control that board as well. But the awesome thing is they've got these large willpowers on them of 5, meaning that they're going to be harder to remove off the field, which again, you want to keep your villains on the field so when your Hades hits, you can quest for a whole lot. You've got your baby Maleficents, and the thing is with this deck, it's pretty much all rares that you're adding in. The baby Maleficent, a couple more Hadeses, the Jafar Keeper of Secrets. The only super rare that you're looking at here is the Queen, and she's added in largely because she's a villain, and she gives you that draw, which lets you once again maintain that card advantage throughout the game, so that you can get all the pieces that you need. Because at the end of the day, this is really a combo deck. It's a lot of fun. It's not the greatest deck, because it does take a lot of setup in order to really pull off your Hades combo and finish off the game, but it is a lot of fun to play.
Yeah. And I do also notice here we're including that second Dr. Facilier of the Storyborn variety, so we have 8 targets total to shift onto that big Facilier for some tempo saving and being able to shift it earlier. So having all those nice shift targets really helps as well.
Yeah, 100%. Plus, the big Facilier himself is a 3 lore character, and so he can shut out games just by him on his own.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the 3-cost Facilier with his ability to filter or scry whenever you sing is really nice, because you've got Friends on the Other Side and Be Our Guests, which are both low cost and high value songs, and so if you're able to combine that, it really just helps you once again get the cards that you need when you need them.
Yeah,
which is great.
All right, and the second deck that we have picked out here with a different sort of package is this Stitch Floodborn focus deck that really ran rampant in the early days of practicing Lorcana. So let's take a look at what it looks like now with the full set out.
Yeah, and even despite Steel getting some cards that really have have helped tame this particular deck, it's still very popular and still doing really well. A very large portion of the Constructed tournament going on in the Discord right now is still running a package very, very similar to this. They're running a Stitch aggro package. Now, this one is given to us by Bjornfoot. I just call him Bjorn. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He's dubbed it It's Wario Time. I don't know why, but it's a cool name.
I think it's because it's Wario's colors, yellow, purple.
Ah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like we talked about, this is primarily a Stitch Turbo deck, and so what that means is we're really focusing in on the Rockstar Stitch's ability to draw whenever you play a 1 or 2 cost character. And so what that does is it allows you to have a huge amount of board presence and maintain your card advantage throughout the game, making it where if your opponent doesn't have something that can basically board wipe, they're going to have a very, very hard time dealing with your board, and you're going to outvalue them over time. Now, the thing here is, so for this deck, we're looking at a couple of more Mickey Wayward Sorcerers as a super rare, and then, of course, the Rockstar Stitch himself as a super rare. This particular deck is also running a little bit of a Singer package with Ariel, who's another super rare. I don't know if it's really that valuable. I think you could do without the Ariel and plug in something else, because the only songs we were looking for here are the Be Our Guest and the Friends on the Other Side, and her Singer 5 isn't really doing anything for these low-cost songs, which means you can also probably drop the Ursula's Shell Necklace as well, because you're already generating a ton of draw power with the Rockstar Stitch himself. And so if you want to find a couple of, cheaper alternatives to put into the deck in order and not have to invest so much into the Ariel super rares, that's totally fine as well. Other than that, we're just running a bunch of low-cost characters, most of which are commons or uncommons. The only rares we're really looking at are the Lilo and the Maleficent. And and the goal here is really just to get out a Lilo or Maleficent turn 1, followed by a Simba turn 2, or get out a Stitch turn 1, followed by a Lantern, and then a Rockstar Stitch turn 3. So those are kind of your two opening plays. One's a little bit more aggro, and then one is setting yourself up for that future massive tempo swing, because if Rockstar Stitch stays on the board for that next turn, you're just going to be able to dump your whole hand and then draw in a bunch of more, letting you just really flood the board with characters. So that's kind of the idea of where this deck is going and what you want to do with it. And it's got a little bit of draw support with our Maleficents and Friends on the Other Side in order to make sure that if you don't have your Rockstar Stitch early, you can draw into it. And you've also got some fun little combos with Mickey and the brooms in order to, give you the potential to, swing in your brooms, bring them back for 1 or 0 cost and play them, and then get your draws from Stitch, and just gives you a nice little value loop as well.
Yeah, just touching back on the figuring something else out for Ariel. I believe the Floodborn Facilier would be a good fit, because again, the weakness of this deck is the lack of removal, and having a Facilier online to run all your small stuff in, and then be able to replay them and draw more if you have your Stitch on the field.
Yep.
And keep drawing. Yeah. So I feel like that would be a nice swap out for the Ariel.
Yeah, 100%. You've got the baby Faciliers are also a 2 cost, so they work with Rockstar Stitch. So that's something I might do here, is swap out the 4 Ariels for 4 baby Faciliers, and the 2 necklaces for 2 big Faciliers, and then boom, you're running.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for the Amethyst deck. Join us next time, where we're going to be going over the Ruby Emerald deck.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments what you think about these particular decks, as well as any other thoughts on upgrading the starter decks and where you would want to take them.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time.